Step into the captivating world of the Behind the Curtain podcast, where your dynamic hosts, John Dyer and Dr. Mohamed Saleh, bring together a wealth of 60 years of combined experience in healthcare and manufacturing. Join us every week as we delve into intriguing topics, weaving unscripted conversations that promise to take you on an unpredictable and enlightening journey. Gain valuable insights for your continuous improvement adventure as we navigate uncharted territories with enthusiasm and expertise. Welcome to a podcast that goes beyond the ordinary, unraveling the mysteries behind the curtain of knowledge.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Curtain. I'm Mohamed Saleh, and with me is John Dyer. And today's episode of Behind the Curtain picks up from where we left off from the last episode around resistance to change. But specifically, today's episode, we're going to talk about loss of control in those efforts. So, John, why don't you start us off? What's your thoughts on individuals as they go through change, they feel loss of control?
Yeah, there's several ways to kind of approach this. In several of our podcasts, we've talked about the kind of the root cause for why a lot of improvement initiatives tend to fail over time. And the biggest one is because we haven't changed the promotional criteria for the leaders of an organization. And if you think about it, what is that promotional criteria? It's the same as it's been since the early 1900s. And that's, how much power do I have? How much control do I have over my people and the processes? How important am I? And that's usually measured by how many meetings I'm double booked to go to and how many emails I get every day. And, look at how important I am because I'm just flooded with all this need for my attention. So that's the very definition of control, right? Is that we tend to reward the people who show that they have the most control over everything. Yeah. All right. And then when something goes wrong, they're the people we tend to go to say, okay, what went wrong? Well, and if they don't have a good answer right away, they feel embarrassed. It's like, oh gosh, that just shows that I'm not in complete control. Yeah. So that's why when something goes wrong, the leader wants to immediately have a meeting with all the involved people to try to understand, what went wrong, who can we blame, how do we deflect blame to someone else or some other department? Because I've got to, keep this facade going of I'm in control of everything and nothing goes wrong while I'm in control. Well, when you think about the definition of lean, it's all in the camp of team-based continuous process improvement, which means that over time, we want the teams that are closest to the process to feel empowered to be able to address issues real time. I mean, that's how you're able to see the significant step function improvements. If you're used to quality yields of 80%, my experience has been when we do get to that team-based continuous improvement mindset where the employees actually address problems real time as they occur, within a year or two, you might be in the upper 90% of quality yield. But that means that the leaders have to be willing to give up some of that control in order to allow the teams to make those kind of decisions, and be empowered. And that's really tough for leaders to do because, again, they're under the mindset of, is that going to damage my reputation and maybe I'll never get promoted. And I actually have seen that happen. I've seen some really terrific leaders who became coaches, mentors, visionaries, and relinquish their control to the people closest to the process. And they loved it because now they were free to actually implement, some of the ideas they've had for years. So morale is much higher, output is better, quality is better, costs come way down. And then that leader gets passed over time and time again for promotions because they kind of, blend into the background now. And then that teaches them to go back to being in control. So yeah, I think loss of control is one of the biggest roadblocks to making improvement happen. How about yourself? What kind of experiences have you had?
As you were speaking right now, my brain's been turning to kind of dissect some of the root causes. Because I've had many situations where when the leader started feeling like they were losing control, they kind of went back to the old way. And when I start looking at like some of the stemming roots of that behavior, two things come to mind for me. The first one, and I had a leader say this to me once, and it's something that's definitely worthy of behind the curtain because it's never talked about, is that they lose their identity. And so they're used to be the firefighter. They're used to being the hero. And now that they're giving, empowerment and to the front line, the staff has the technical competencies and the clarity, so they're empowered to do the work. They don't know what to do. They've lost that identity. They were the hero of the story, now they're not. They were and so they don't know what to do. And so I think one of that, that causes people to freak out. Like, it's like my identity was I was the go-to person who resolved everyone's problem, and now I'm not. So what am I? And they don't have anything to substitute that with, especially in the beginning of a journey of a transformation. Or maybe like when things start to ramp up and they truly have started creating psychological safety and empowering the teams. So I think that's one of the reasons. So I think as we help leaders relinquish control and give decision makers to the lowest possible level of the organization, of where the work happens, we have to be mindful of how are we going to substitute that identity? How are we going to mold and help that individual overcome that identity? So I think that's one of the reasons that we should focus on.
Yeah, and think about it. I agree with what you're saying, and how do we redefine a leader as a good coach? I mean, think about it, right? When you think of a professional sports team, right, you have a lot of players who, when they're, on the court or out in the field or whatever sport we're talking about, they're empowered to make the plays.
Mm-hmm.
But the coach is still providing them input. And then before the game, the coach is the one that is mentoring them, training them, providing them the intelligence of, what the other team is doing, who the competition is, and developing the plays, and then really working hard to get the best out of all their players. And it's fascinating to me to watch some sports teams that have no real big stars on there. They're all good players, but not great players, but with a great coach who can get everything out of those players and make them a cohesive unit where they play together and build off of each other's strengths, where they're the Cinderella team, right? It's like where did this team come from? Oh my goodness. And we need to start thinking in those terms, right? Because right off the top of our head, we can think of a dozen amazing coaches, right? That get really good salaries. They get the big contracts, get really big salaries because they're able to get the most out of their players. Why can't we carry that over into industry to say, let's start rewarding those people who can get the most out of their workers by building them into a team, by building up morale, by providing them mentoring and insights and training, and start thinking of it in those terms. That the new promotional definition is who's the best coach.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and I 100% agree with that because I feel as people lose that identity, I think I could only speak for myself. I need to do a better job of framing what that new role is. And being able to say, hey, one of the things that your new identity is going to be known for is the quality of your questions. And that was going to be one of your identity aspects, is that when people see you, they know that, hey, this is the person that asks really thought-provoking questions. And so let's build that. Not the person that firefights, but the person that asks thought-provoking questions. Because back to being what you said, a coach, that's going to be your identity now, is that you're going to be a coach. And so I think that's one of the things that industry in general could do better at, is that they tell people you need to relinquish control, but they don't tell them what to substitute it with. It's
right.
implied that you need to be a better coach, but what does that mean? Like, does that mean like I just let everyone experiment and just like things go wild, or am I going to be a person that is scientific in the way they approach things and be able to give people protected time to experiment and fail fast and recognize failures? Am I going to, really pay attention to the quality of the questions that I ask? Am I going to really roll up my sleeves and go out there and observe and give feedback to the people as they do the work, and not hold on to the outcome, but hold on to the process of how people are getting to the outcome. So that's one, I would say. The second one, because I'm very sympathetic towards leaders as they go through this, and I think you and I have talked about this many times, is that when you go into uncharted territories, it's scary. And so you're used to driving the ship, you're used to doing it, and now all of a sudden there's this new path of a transformation, and you have no clue where you're going. So once you leave that shore and you're out in the water, um, it's terrifying, and you'll do everything in your power to gain back the reins of that ship because you're viewed as weak because you don't know where you're going. And so, because you're learning just as much as everyone around you is learning, and sometimes because of your capacity, they're learning faster than you, and they know more than you, and that scares people. So, I would say another one is, as people go through uncharted waters, how do we enable them with a compass, so that they know where they're going? Because they might not be able to hold or steer the ship, but they at least know the true north. They know what the end destination is going to look like. And I know I could do a better job at that when I help leaders through that, because sometimes that is why they're not letting go of what they have, because they don't know.
Well, and again, this is why it's so critically important that everyone from the top CEO all the way through is on board with this.
100%.
Because let's say we put a team together out on the shop floor, and we've empowered them to address quality issues as they pop up, or identify ways to improve and get rid of waste and those kinds of things. At some point they're going to screw up, right? They're going to make a mistake. We all do. It's inevitable. They're going to make a mistake and make the wrong decision, and something could happen. Now, of course, if it's in the realm of safety, you would want to put some guardrails in to make sure that that doesn't happen, that there are no unsafe decisions. But let's say that it's a decision that causes a quality issue to pop up, and all of a sudden we have to scrap, a bunch of units. So how the leaders above the coach respond to that is going to be critical to this long-term success. Because if the CEO calls up that person who's over that department and starts, asking questions like, how did you let this happen? What are you going to do to personally make sure this never happens again? Who are you going to fire? Those kinds of questions. Well, guess what? I'm not going to be a coach anymore. I'm going to go back to being the command and control person.
100%.
Instead, the CEO will need to call up pull the whole team together, maybe even out on the shop floor, and say, all right, what did we learn from this experience?
Yep.
What do we need to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? What can we do to improve the process
Yep.
to make sure that the pieces are in the right place to make sure this never happens again? Those kinds of questions but makes the coach realize that, oh, this is a learning opportunity, not a who's in charge, who's in control slam.
Yeah.
And but guess what? Unless the CEO is the one who originates all of this, that probably isn't going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I think one final thing that as you were talking, I was like, that's I think another one is, who wants to give up power? Like realistically, like who wants to give up power? Like that takes a level of humility that I don't think just comes accidentally or comes um by just choice. I think it requires certain disciplines to learn how to be a selfless leader. I think there's a journey there all on its own. And then as you start seeing the nourishment and the success of others, that should fuel you to understand that the power you're giving up is being rewarded by the fulfillment of growing those around you. But to just say out of faith, like, I'm just gonna give up power and be a humble leader and be selfless, like, who's gonna relinquish that unless you're being fulfilled in another way, because power is fulfilling for some people, and they won't give it up unless the cup is being filled with something in return. I think it goes back to identity.
right. Yeah. Early in my career, I got involved in helping to facilitate problem-solving teams, right? And as a trained facilitator, I also do a lot of training in this realm as well. You're taught as a facilitator that it's not about you at all. You're there to help the team be successful. And over time, you relinquish more and more of the facilitation to the team to where they become self-facilitating, and then you can, bow out. Well, there have been many, many times where a team will be really struggling and not making any progress, and I will have been asked, hey, John, can you go in and help facilitate them for a while, get them back on track? And I'll do that. And then all of a sudden they start to really thrive and they become very successful and end up doing something dramatic to improve the process
Yeah.
and get some kind of big, reward or recognition. And my name won't be anywhere on that list. It'll be the team, they'll be the ones that will be receiving that reward. And I'm okay with that because I know I was able to help them, but it wasn't about me. It was about them. And again, think about it, right? That's what a good coach, the coach never gets the MVP award.
Yeah.
Right. But the coach does get to celebrate with the team when they win the championship. And they get, interviewed and so forth, just like the players, but they never get the MVP award.
Yeah.
So we got, back to how would you redefine what a coach would look like in industry? Well, part of it would be maybe we should start measuring success of leaders based on how well their team performs.
Yeah.
Right. How many MVPs were they able to create?
Yeah.
In my book, I lay out what a day might look like in this realm of, someone who's a coach.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you start the day off by walking the Gemba, right? Going out and actually talking to the employees and finding out how things are going and what's the morale and what can they do to help, spend time to really engage with employees. Then, after that, you might sit down with a customer and find out what where are we headed as an industry, and maybe we need to realign our vision. Then you sit down with your staff or your team and develop, okay, what are our future plays going to look like? And then you do some one-on-one mentoring. And then you might sit down with a supplier. Now, you'll notice in that list, what are you not doing? You're not putting out fires. You're not running around like your, head's chopped off. You're actually preparing your team for the future to make them better and better and better.
You're setting the stage for them.
Huh?
Yeah. You're setting the stage for them. Yeah.
Right. Why can't we make that the criteria for a successful leader?
Yeah.
But like I said, it starts with the top, because the moment something goes wrong and the CEO calls up that person, that leader, and starts chewing them out for not being in control,
yeah,
all bets are off. It'll go right back to the way it was.
I think having the identity of being a coach and defining what that looks like, I think is critical takeaway here. I think creating the compass of the uncharted areas and people know where they're going, I think is another one. But I also feel making sure that people are getting fulfilled with growing people around them as they relinquish the power, and not just expect it to be a switch that tomorrow they're just going to relinquish all power. Because in the end of the day, it could actually come back much worse and much harder if not dealt with appropriately. And I've made my own mistakes before where I wanted everything to be rushed, and the second something goes wrong, like you said, and the top kind of comes down with the hammer, that person not only tries to take the power and control back, they actually take it back in a more aggressive way.
Right. And
so
what you're describing, we've talked about this in previous podcasts, and it's in my book, right, about the 4 different styles of leadership. That's exactly what that does, is it helps the organization ease into it over a period of time versus just jumping right to that kind of a structure.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Awesome. Well, this was a wonderful episode. I hope the learners and the listeners all got to enjoy and learn from this as well. I definitely enjoyed it, and I can't wait to pick up next week with another episode still around resistance to change, and really dive into some of the reasons people get fatigued through innovation.
Very good. We'll see you then.
Take care, John.
As we draw the curtains on another fascinating episode, we wanted to express our gratitude for joining us on this enlightening journey. If you're hungry for more captivating and thought-provoking discussions with John Dyer and Dr. Mohamed Saleh, hit that subscribe button to ensure you don't miss a beat. Until next week, keep exploring, stay inquisitive, and stay inspired. See you on the next Behind the Curtain adventure.